Morning, everyone. Welcome. Just hang tight while we wait for everyone to jump onto the session. For those of you who haven't been with us before, we're Academy XI. My name is Eric. I'll be introducing our panelists very shortly. But yeah, just hang tight for a little bit. Morning, everyone. If you're just jumping on, just hang tight with us for a few minutes. For those of you who just heard me say this, apologies. Always the obligatory, awkward, waiting for the webinar to kick off time. Hey guys, probably for the third and final time, if you're just joining us, we're just going to be another 30 seconds or so. Just waiting for everyone to jump on. But this, just so you're in the right place, is digital transformation trends for 2021. We've got some heavy hitter panelists here with us today. We're going to be open discussion, sort of shop talky, pretty casual, but hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. So we'll be starting very shortly. And yeah, I see a lot of people throwing their sort of greetings and saying hello in the chat. Feel free to do that. I'll have a bit of housekeeping coming up in a moment as well, just in terms of how today will run, but it'll be pretty straightforward. All right, I think I might get us started for the session. So hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. So before I get kicked off, I just want to do the acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're virtually gathered today and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So as mentioned, this webinar is on the topic of digital transformation and trends therein for 2021. Things would have been very different back in 2001. So, I mean, as you all know, this pace of digital transformation is accelerating rapidly, has been doing so, previous to COVID, but COVID really was the accelerant there. Things are changing in often cases, too quickly for people to keep up with, and that goes on an individual and company basis. So that's going to be the topic of today. Just before we jump into that, just wanted to talk a little bit about Academy XI, which is the organization that I work for. So we're a school is the simplest way to describe it. So we train teams, organizations, and individuals in digital data design and customer centricity disciplines. So things like product management, software development, UX, CX, service design, digital marketing, data analytics, kind of all emerging disciplines where there will be more jobs in these spaces next year than there are this year, and more the year after that. And for us, doing what we do, obviously digital transformation is super important for a number of reasons. One, we are producing, I guess, the digital practitioners of tomorrow that are going out into workforces that are in super high demand at the moment. We also train teams, inside, existing teams inside organizations, both foundational level digital acumen, right into redeployment programs and moving people into digital roles. And what do those roles look like in a rapidly changing environment? And then we do a lot of what we call customer-centric transformation programs, which are helping organizations become more customer-centric, and digital underpins that. Although in today's day and age, I think we'll probably touch on this, we see a lot of people leading with digital transformation instead of working out what they're actually trying to achieve first. Which in my sort of opinion should always come back to the customer and your stakeholders and what they actually need, and have digital being an enabler instead of the sort of means to the end. So that's kind of why we've set up today. Just a few housekeeping items, as I mentioned. So I'm seeing lots of people saying hello in the chat. Please do that. If you want to use that as a little mini networking channel, feel free. So if you want to post your LinkedIn profile, etc., Lots of times we get pretty interesting conversations going on in there. And for any of you who have been on our webinars in the past, sometimes I know you guys see each other in there, so feel free to say hello. And you'll also see at the bottom a Q&A function. If you haven't been on a webinar with Zoom before, you can throw a question for anyone from the panel in there. If we do happen to see it during the session, we will try to answer it, but we'll also keep about 10-15 minutes at the end of this session to answer your guys' questions. So you can direct them to the whole group, or you can direct them to a specific person, totally up to you. No guarantees that we'll get through all of them, and we try to keep that 10 minutes, but sometimes we nerd out a little too much and we go a bit long, but we'll do our best to leave some time at the end. So that's kind of about me, about XI, and about today. Now, for sort of the stars of the show, I want to introduce our panelists for today, who we're super excited to have with us. So first off, we've got Lizzy Brockhoff, who is head of product at Kohls, coming from, I think, about 10 years in the States, working for major organizations, including Walmart, I believe. Then we've got Stephanie Shang, who is head of media at Essence, which is, I believe, the head media agency for organizations such as Google and Airbnb. So super knowledgeable in that area, the media space, digital marketing. And then we've got, last but not least, Josh Slighting, who is head of data, and I might get this wrong, head of data and digital audience, I think, at Network 10. So as you're getting the feel, some extremely senior people in the room here. But again, this is going to be a casual conversation, and yeah, really going to just exchange thoughts, ideas on what COVID has done to business, and how digital transformation is changing, how it's speeding up, and how you guys can respond. So I will now open up to the floor. It's going to be sort of, the format will be just to sort of pose a question, call upon people, and then we'll just kind of go organic from there. So the first question of the day is probably, I mean, not really going to be a surprise. So how inside your businesses are you seeing COVID accelerate change, drive digital transformation? And I might start with Lizzy.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I can give some context to my perspectives, both sort of outside and within Kohls, where I am now. For context, last year I was actually based in New York, so was really sort of amongst the height of that COVID peak back in March of 2020. And I think, you know, what we saw was that, you know, COVID was a massive accelerant for digital transformation. You know, we saw the really rapid adoption of remote workforce and video conferencing. I think, you know, everyone fled New York overnight at the end of March. Really exciting acceleration of adoption of online learning, which I think has had some really positive sort of societal impacts in terms of, you know, increasing access. And those tech forward companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, that, you know, have been digital first from day one, really are the beneficiaries of a lot of the sort of effects of COVID. And I think the positive thing is post-COVID, we are seeing a lot of these digital trends stick. You know, work from home at Kohls is a thing. You know, we'll never have everyone 100% back in the workforce. It's going to be very flexible. So I think there's a lot of positives to the sort of, you know, wider macroeconomic sort of accelerants that we've seen. In terms of Kohls, and I think just if you think about online sales, I was looking at some stats, but in the US over an 8-week period, we saw an adoption that sort of, in terms of online sales, that has taken a decade. So that happened, you know, in 8 weeks, which is really amazing. And I think, you know, Kohls being essential retail is another, I suppose, beneficiary of this, you know, rapid move to adoption of online shopping. So for us internally, I would say it's just been an extra accelerant. We were already doubling down in terms of creating a really best-in-class omni-channel shopping experience. And for us internally, it's just been a demand from customers and what Australians need to sort of accelerate internally.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting with Academy XI, we were sort of almost divides down into the people who were on digital transformation pathways previous to COVID and those who weren't. Like, we were kind of already on one. And so when COVID hit, we just switched to digital training across the board, and we haven't looked back. And we've sort of accelerated past other organizations that we compete with for that reason. But if we hadn't already been sort of on that journey, we would have really struggled to keep up. How about you, Steph? Do you have any thoughts on, or just some sort of insights on how COVID has sort of affected your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in my role, like a lot of what we do at Essence is media and marketing advisory. And so kind of off the back of that, working with quite digitally sophisticated brands like Google and Airbnb, we have to constantly keep an eye on, I guess, how consumer behavior has changed. And what we've noticed is, essentially as a society, we've been incredibly resourceful in that we've identified the need to transform, but a lot of it has using, I guess, technology that's been sitting dormant for quite some time. Like, who would have thought in this day and age, QR codes are trending? Like, we all thought it was like just a WeChat thing from a marketing point of view, but actually, like, we're seeing it just become the new normal. And off the back of that, an NFC technology, which for ages took a really long time to get people to understand the value of. So from that point of view, we're now seeing that translate into the communication space. In terms of, should we be putting QR codes in outdoor messages, with the likes of Josh talking about adding QR codes into freeze frame ads when people are watching, 10 play and things like that. So I think that level of transformation is something that is formulating how, brands talk to consumers. And that's something that I'm really personally quite interested in.
Right, Josh, did you want to weigh in as well? How's network reacting?
I think for us, there's I have two lenses on this. One is we got super focused around things, and I think there was a real acceleration of things, like partly in response to those market changes, but there was just a transition, I think, in our business in terms of people's mindset and approach to certain projects. There was a bit of dumb luck with timing. But for us, it was really just an accelerated flow of a lot of things that were already on our transformation plan and agenda. But I think it just forced us to get things done a lot faster. We were much sharper as a collective. And if I think too, like some of the adaptations that were made for us as a TV network, like making shows like Have You Been Paying Attention, for example, if anyone watches that, that's a format that's generally in a studio. And we ended up getting people on iPads and staging a pretty good production in spite of those things. So it was one in the way we produced and made shows. It was two in just absolute sniper-like focus around things because we had to be really clinical with resources. And I talk about resources, it was funding, it was budget, it was people's time and so on into key projects that we knew we would deliver really solid value. And then if I think like the opposite side, or the added consideration that was probably there for us, and I'm sure this is a shared thing for everybody, but I think there's a massive toll on the people in our business, because with all that focus and that acceleration and that pressure, you're having people starting new jobs while working from home. You miss the onboarding piece, you miss the camaraderie. You have teams that generally work really well. We're a business, especially a sales team, that has a phenomenal culture. It's part of the draw card of working in our organizations, that the culture was exceptionally strong, which is really unlocked by being together. And you can try and do as many things. And our sales leaders did a phenomenal job, because they ended up doing kind of daily stand-ups and checking in with each other in Zoom calls, and people were coming up with trivia, and they made it fun. But there was this added tax on people just by virtue of you starting and stopping your day in the same place, often in the same room. And that, I think, was exceptionally hard through last year. So while there's more flexibility, you can work from home, we got more stuff done, arguably because there was a performance advantage. I think there was also a knock-on toll because people are so fixed to work, and that puts a lot of the ownership and responsibility that often comes down to you as an individual to put the right rigor and structures in place in your life. And that's something I think we still have to finesse in this new world that we live in.
Yeah, that's I guess there's like the two sides to sort of what effect digital transformation is having on a business. It's you've got your culture and your team, and that's sort of something everyone's living and breathing and has done for a long time now. And then how the business actually reacts to external forces and how you transform. Like, it's interesting what you're saying. One, I love Have You Been Paying Attention? Watch it every week. And yeah, when you guys switched to having the contestants or comedians from home. Like I barely even noticed, to be honest. And when they went back into the studio, I was like, oh, look, they're back in the studio, but I didn't really care. Like, and that's actually like kind of a testament to, like, we teach service design as one of our core subjects, and it has like, we're seeing massive acceleration in like service design agencies can like barely, they can't keep up to the amount of work, because it's really kind of like hammered home that like, what can we do digitally, or what do we have to do digitally? What can stay the way it was? And it gets that really good, like, looking at customer journeys and figuring out where you can digitize and where you don't have to, and being creative in how you can change your business model. So it's and then where do once you make those changes, how do you bring your organization on that ride? How do you bring your teams on that ride with you? It's and do you do one first and then the other, or like who's leading who? Sometimes at the beginning it was probably a bit of blind leading the blind, I would say, but we've come a long way since then. So that was also a really good segue into our second question is, how are staff reacting? So maybe Lizzy, jump back to you. How have you seen kind of, and maybe you can go two sides, like one, like sort of digital native type staff, digital teams, and then non-digital teams, like how have those reactions been to COVID and digital transformation?
Yeah, I think for context, within Kohls e-commerce, we are, as I mentioned, fully on the digital transformation journey. And I would say we are going through, big changes in terms of ways of working. So we're, moving to fully agile within the e-commerce business, but we do face into the rest of Kohls that is still working in different ways. So that is something that we constantly are iterating on the processes to make sure that we can still work really cohesively with other teams across the business. I will say one thing, that digital transformation, moving to very product-led, agile ways of working is most rewarding when you have the ability to speak to your customers, get feedback, have access to the data, and can iterate, really quickly. And we as an online grocery business are very well positioned to do that, given the customer base and that we're consumer facing. So I think that's one advantage we have in terms of it's a really positive thing for our teams that are moving to totally agile ways of working and very digital omni-channel focus, that we do have those like rapid feedback cycles, so teams can learn and iterate and see the benefits that they're giving to customers, and there's sort of a real appetite to test and learn and learn from failures as well. So I think we're in a pretty fortunate position, given that, we have those short feedback cycles. So, it's very positive, and our teams are embracing it. And I think through COVID, what customers need becomes very evident. So I think that sort of helps strategically.
Toilet paper.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, one thing we've seen a huge uptick in is organizations bringing in like voice of customer programs that never used to have them before, and like CEM systems and so on, that where for the first time, like, because as a human-centered design organization, training organization, we're constantly do your user research, and like someone like Kohls that has that wealth of data, probably has been in that space for a long time, but a lot of organizations are still kind of new to this party. So I think that's been, to me, a big positive, is that people are embracing the concept of user research and, data-driven decision-making at that level, which maybe there's still kind of that gut feel exec level thing going on in some industries. And I think that COVID has kind of changed that. It no longer really flies, maybe. Josh, did you want to sort of, I guess you did touch a little bit on how your teams and organizations like been reacting, but do you want to elaborate on that?
I think the only thing I respond to what you just said is I think the margin for error is far more narrow now, which is probably why you see people default to numbers instead of gut feelings, because it's a more measurable, I'm more confident making a decision based on fact than I am on hope, because the consequences are quite significant, right? So, and look, in response to the other thing, I think the people impact for us, there's obviously a lot of, I think the most obvious thing is people's resilience has really shone through, because you just have to get on with stuff, and we're, all of us as just a human race, and even now we're back in lockdown, I think people just cope well, and we've adapted reasonably well. I think that resilience piece for us, everyone's going to come out of this experience one day far better and stronger with their ability to handle problems and big disruptive forces, like as an individual personally and within business. I think this experience sucks, but we're learning a lot, and sometimes it's hard to see that. And I think people have really been able to grow that. The other part is, I think the skills changes are rapid. They are so, because you're kind of, especially for us, probably similar for you, Lizzy, with what you're just saying. You're trying to accelerate work, and all that's doing is it's obviously it's helping the business, but you land up shining a light on resource skills gaps, things like that, where you have a need that you can't fulfill. And in our market now, it's so challenging, right? You got like, there's not enough people to feed the monster because there's such high demand, and that complete shift in the opposite direction. So for us is, you've got a changing tide in terms of the profile and mix of people that you need. We're not quite operating that agile way. I think that lends itself to a whole different set of complexity, but the same kind of source or underlying problems exist, where we don't have 200 developers, so we can envy businesses like Google and Facebook and them that kind of were born in digital, because they're engineering teams, the development teams, those kind of teams that are driving forces behind some of these are amazing. So we put huge amounts of pressure on our existing skills and teams to do things that they're now stretching what they were hired to do in the first place. And it's exciting, and you're doing new work, but that does present a big challenge. Is how do you evolve your skills mix while teaching people who are here, so you're keeping everyone gainfully employed and enjoying what they're doing, while maintaining everyone's resilience and keeping everything. So that balance is exceptionally difficult. I don't know if I even answered your question. I think there were just things that I was thinking about.
No, it's all good. We want to hear about what you're passionate in, like the challenges you're facing at the moment, right? So, and yeah, I mean, that's something that we see constantly. I mean, because I guess the one thing that we're seeing at the moment is like, you can't hire a software developer to save your life at the moment. Like, they just literally, like, we've got recruitment company partners who are getting offers from companies saying like, hey, we need 100 developers by next year. Here's as much money as you possibly need. And they're like, we can't do it. They don't exist. The market is just so strapped for skilled digital staff at the moment. We've got people trying to coming to us and say, hey, can we like buy out your whole graduating software development class? And things like that, which is good for us, but it's not great for the company. And then other things where we're just starting to see organizations willing to retrain and redeploy existing staff into digital roles, because they literally, like, this is the only way they can find to do this. And like, there's a lot of reasons to do that, but it is a big mindset shift. So it's interesting that you've mentioned that as well. Moving on maybe to the next question. Is innovation being democratized in your organization? I might go to Steph for this one. Yeah, I think you're probably a really good person actually to speak on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that, for a lot of the companies that we work with, the likes of Google and Facebook, from a marketplace standpoint, we are definitely seeing that innovation being democratized, in the sense of, I guess, those types of companies opening up what they do to other people to be able to build on top of. So I think with the likes of Facebook introducing Facebook FMPs, or like marketing partners and things like that, that's a really interesting way in which that innovation can continue to happen, so that individuals that are a third party can start to develop capabilities on the Facebook platform to be able to drive marketing solutions and needs. So I think that for me is a really interesting trend, because for these types of companies, they hit a certain point where they have to outsource that innovation and look outwards rather than inwards. And I think that dynamic is quite fascinating, to acknowledge that, yes, it's absolutely important to innovate from within, but it's also great to be able to have that two-way dynamic and be able to outsource and get ideas from different places.
Yeah, it's interesting for us. We've always traditionally seen sort of like the design product development process is like inside a black box inside organizations. And now it just starts to feel like that black box is kind of being opened up a little bit. And if you actually give people the platforms and the tools to build on, makes it that much easier. What about you, Lizzy? What are your thoughts on innovation inside Kohls, and whether it's being sort of democratized around the business?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something I thought a lot about when I was at Walmart, and I've also tried to bring some of the principles or goals to Kohls. But I think it's really important, to empower, I lead a team of product managers, and I want to make sure that they feel empowered to sort of do their job and impact the customer experience, and they do have ownership over that. And that in itself I see is innovation. The way I've sort of trying to approach this is, we do use an OKR framework at Kohls, which has been effective. And in terms of, setting OKRs, it's really important that we have sort of portfolio or like business level OKRs, but our squads or product managers that are leading squads have a clear line of sight as to what their laddered OKRs are. And what their squad is really going after in terms of metrics. So one thing that I really work hard on is making sure that that is clear. And then within that, really empowering the product managers to own the roadmap that will impact the OKR that they're trying to move, or the objective. So I think the reality of the situation is there is always going to be top-down strategic initiatives that, the business is really rallying around. And how I'm trying to manage that is really encouraging that, for a given squad or a product manager managing a squad, that, 20% of their roadmap is dedicated to strategic, business initiatives. And but the sort of other 70% of that roadmap is very much owned by that squad or that product manager, and they have, real ownership to prioritize a roadmap against, that 70% of their squad's capacity. So that's how I'm trying to really promote that, the teams on the ground really do have the power to sort of innovate within their space. And then we also do have other, a really rigorous prioritization process quarter on quarter. And yeah, there is opportunities for, if people have got good ideas within their various parts of the business, that those ideas can be surfaced up and funded, pitched and funded. So there is a real opportunity for our team members to make their own stamp and impact on our customer experience.
Yeah, I guess, with change comes opportunity. When things are in sort of BAU mode, it's pretty hard often to sort of be heard and put your hand up and say, hey, I think this would be a better way of working or of doing things. But when things are changing rapidly anyway, it's sort of a good opportunity to say, well, we need a solution here. Let's put this out to the larger group and see what comes back. And good ideas can sometimes come from unexpected places, and so I think that's been another positive side of all the change that is happening. So, sort of a follow-on question, I guess, to some of the other ones. So, how has the digital function inside your businesses become more business critical? Like, do you have more of a seat at the table, like the exec table? Do you have more of the exec ear than you used to have? Are you engaging with more parts of the organization than you used to? Josh, maybe come back to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yep. Yes. The answer is yes, in short. From a digital standpoint, for sure. I mean, we, as an industry, it's probably the most obvious one, because you see firsthand the changing. If you're a consumer watching TV, you can see all the choice that you now have, right? And that's, for us, a massive change. It's our competitive kind of forces are coming in left, right, and center, and it's making, let me start that again. Our audience is essentially changing in response to more choice. Okay. And that's a good thing for the industry. It's a good thing for people. You've got so much stuff to choose from that, you don't even know where to start. We have a core business that's allowed us to get to this point, which is broadcast television or linear television. So aerials, plug and play, you've got your fixed channels. The shifting viewing habits of our audiences is increasing at a pretty phenomenal rate, and it's across our industry. So not just with broadcasters, but you've got a lot of subscription services. I'm sure everyone on this call, everyone watching, has a Netflix subscription, a Stan subscription, maybe Foxtel Go, whatever it is. Those things are forcing a lot of change. So for us, go where people's attention is and invest heavily. And that is getting so much more attention for us as a business. Very positive. It's also the fastest growing, and that's a nice place to be in. When you're in the growth part of the business, when you see these crazy numbers, because you're coming from a low baseline, and so the numbers in terms of their growth look phenomenal. In the grand scheme of things, is how you have to keep a pretty measured approach when you're assessing the overall health of your business, but digital itself is getting massive attention because it's growing and performing phenomenally well. So yes, is the short answer. Lot more buy-in, and I expect to see even more. We're launching a paid subscription service called Paramount Plus in August. That's another paid streaming service for us to compete, not just locally, but at a global level too. So even the seat at the table that we once had is evolving. And the focus and the type of investment and the type of approaches and strategies and the way you're engaging the market is evolving very rapidly. And it's exciting. That is a very exciting part for us.
Yeah, there's actually something you mentioned. I might put you on the spot. There's something you mentioned in the lead up to this around, and this is a bit of a maybe a tangent, but around the use of the word legacy. So like legacy business model versus the current new hot thing. And like I admit that I use the word legacy all the time, and you kind of called it out, and I was like, I use that like a derogatory term almost. When I say, oh, it's a legacy business model, like that's boo, basically, which isn't really fair, because if, like you're saying, where TV, even though there's all these new digital channels coming in, if the traditional channel still bears, is the majority of the revenue, anyone who's working inside that space is going to be kind of offended when you say, well, you're the legacy business, but they're still the one keeping it afloat. So like, is that, you want to maybe just touch on that again?
Yeah. So look, I
don't have to go into too much detail on it, but
no, it's fine. My view on this is one of out of responsibility, because it's very easy for us to get caught up in the new shiny things, and those are good things because that's where our growth is coming from. But you do have a responsibility to your people, to your systems, and those kind of things, to not negate continued or sustained investment in keeping the lights on in the thing that actually keeps the lights on. That big engine for us is what pays for us to grow into new areas, and we can't necessarily dismiss that. And I personally have a strong feeling around care for people and making sure that you give employees for your business that have helped you get that far longevity and the ability to move around into new areas or to have experiences in new areas. And that's something I think all businesses do a pretty shady job at, outside of maybe agencies. Is exposing people to new things, new projects, the ability to learn on the job while you're doing things and to grow pretty quickly. Outside of core services agencies or business models, it's very hard to get that level of exposure. And so when you're working in a structure that falls into that legacy bucket, I think we have a responsibility there in that. So it should be viewed as a positive, because it's a very core part of our business. A very important part of our business. And so how do we think about them moving forward?
Yeah, it's big for us, where we'll do foundational training like digital data design, just like 1-day courses for non-digital data design teams, like introduction to human-centered design, etc. And it's amazing to see just like the light bulbs come on inside like non-digital staff, just from like being included, and like having the company say like, hey, we care enough about you, and this is important enough that we want to give you foundational knowledge, even if you're not going to become a software developer. Like that's not necessarily the goal, but just kind of bringing people on that incremental journey. We see some pretty cool outcomes from that. Just trying to check time and see how we're going. Might move on to the next question. So next question, is the speed of change going on because of digital transformation inside your businesses affecting your team? So actually kind of a follow-on to what we were just talking about. Are people struggling to keep up with change? Do people feel like their skills are no longer relevant? And maybe we'll go back to Steph for that one.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of how we've been working with each other and the teams in general, like we're really fortunate at Essence to be set up in a way where, it's kind of by default an expectation that you're able to work with someone in a different market that you've never physically met and deliver outcomes together. And same thing with our clients, because we do have, Singapore-based clients working on Google. So with that in mind, like that friction of working with the G Suite has meant that despite the pandemic, it's been business as usual. We've delivered tens of millions of dollars of advertising spend with relatively little hiccups. That said, from an industry standpoint, like back to your question previously, like we as an agency have more of a role to play, because as digital products transform and as digital business models transform, the role of marketing becomes even more important in terms of bridging that gap between what's happening in marketing that's impacting the things that we can measure and track when it comes to business outcomes. And so I think that's the part that my team is frantically upskilling on, because literally the information changes every few months. Like right now, it's a really topical conversation in the advertising space around the deprecation of cookies, and the introduction of things like data privacy sandboxes, and new identifiers. And then all of a sudden that could be, I guess, delayed for 2 years. And you know, marketers are kind of left in flux. And as agencies, we have to help them navigate how to, I guess, deal with that ambiguity. So cognitive flexibility and the ability to be able to understand technical changes very quickly and how that impacts things from a macro perspective is, I would say, the biggest single-minded challenge that my team has to continue to be strategic and consultative in how they approach media and advertising.
I do think that people who come from agencies and agencies in general are sort of they're well suited to respond to change, because they've always got so many clients going on anyway, and clients are changing briefs, let's be blunt. And also
100%.
just work, like I come from agency land, and you're also working with multiple agents, companies and clients that have different needs. And you're like just totally flipping your mindset each time you go and work on a different client. But if you're client side, it's pretty easy to get really sort of kind of trapped inside the way that you think. And so when you are forced to then make major sweeping changes like we've been seeing, it's a little bit slow off the mark. And I think that's why agencies have actually done really well, is because then the client goes, well, I need help. And then they go out to agency who can shift faster, I guess.
Yeah, and I think marketing it used to be seen as an art form. And I think over time, it's really become a blend of marketing science too. And so I think that is another really big thing that, you know, like, that kind of, you know, human-centric thinking, like just bringing it back to solving real problems is, I think, ultimately what grounds us as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before the session around how like CX and marketing are kind of like merging into one. Pretty soon, all of these things is just going to be one huge role where you can't really do one thing without the other. So yeah, very interesting changes. I mean, a lot of it is exciting. Okay, so this is a question I've been quite keen to hear from probably all three of you about. Do executives need to understand digital better? Quite a weighted question, so you can feel free to dance around the subject if any of your executives are on this call particularly. But I think it is a discussion that needs to kind of be had. So maybe go back to you, Lizzy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's really important that leaders, or be it sponsors of projects, are thinking strategically about digital and are supporting and backing any changes in ways of working. I think, you know, that is when organizations and teams are set up for success. I think the reality is that, you know, you're always going to have differing levels of digital sort of know-how or maturity across the business, right, from leadership down. And I suppose how we handle that is tailoring to the right audience when we're delivering our messages. But I think, you know, if we take sort of Kohls' agile transformation, you know, we have ultimate support from, you know, our CEO of e-commerce, and he really believes in it. And ultimately, you know, that is setting us up for success.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so with a company like, we just happen to have three quite digitally forward sort of people from three digitally forward organizations here. You know, so, you know, what you're talking about is a company that's going, you know, through like moving to tribe model and, you know, your version of Spotify, whatever it is that you guys call that. But then on the other end of the sort of spectrum, you've got organizations that have probably never even heard of these things before. And you've got executives who, although quite senior, aren't digital natives. Is there any safe space for them to put up their hand and say, like, I don't, like, how do you as a non-digital native at exec level manage digital departments and teams when you don't have a strong understanding, I guess, of what those people you're managing do? But I mean, so there's a whole wide spectrum there. How would you say, Josh, without throwing any execs under the bus, what is the understanding, would you say, at exec level, and how do you engage with exec level around digital initiatives?
I think that often we have to go back to some of the core principles of how you get a business to buy in or sponsor anything that you're doing. So whether it's a digital project or anything else, executive people speak a certain language, which often comes back to a cost center, a profit center, something like that. And I don't think we often do a good enough job. I said we are, in varying cases, do a good enough job linking the two together. So essentially it's an ask. It's an ask for investment. It's an ask to do something different for the business. You have to put in the work to communicate the value back to the business, to shareholders, to board members, to whatever it is. You're either saving money, you're growing money, you're making more profit, you're delivering and competing faster in the market. There's a language divide, I think, between these initiatives that teams are working on and identifying as opportunities, but the connection back to customer impact, a business impact, and especially a financial impact, to me feels like the biggest territory that needs to be resolved. Because it's not so much about, most exec people don't know the ins and outs and the nitty gritty of the things happening on the ground. Like that's why you have teams and teams of people who manage and carry out day-to-day stuff. Digital things or transformation initiatives are not dissimilar. If you're going to invest in something or radically change a business model, do something different, you're going to spend money. That money probably doesn't exist in a current budget. You're asking the business to come up with that money to justify and back something, quantifying the ROI, return, whatever it is, the value back to executive teams is actually, at least from my perspective, that is how you unlock and you get buy-in. Trying to do it any other way and convincing someone of the features and functions and whatever else you're doing is probably where there's that massive disconnect, because executive people don't look at that stuff day to day. They look at shareholder performance and the stock price, and that's if you're a listed company, whatever. Those things are quite material to them. So how do you change what you're doing to communicate in a language that they're actually going to resonate, because it's going to help short circuit, or not short circuit, that's a bad one. Will shorten the speed at which you can probably get things invested in or done.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've literally built courses around like sort of trying to reduce that disconnect where you've got, sort of digital teams going up and talking features, functions, backlog, like constraints to exec, and exec going like, what are you talking about? Why are you giving me the information that I need? I need to know, I need P&L, I need stuff like this. And if you're not speaking in the language that the exec understands, and then they're pushing back, and then you've got the digital teams going like, these guys don't get it. And then you've got the exec team going like, these guys don't get it. And then nothing really happens, I guess. Steph, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think it's not about having deep digital knowledge, but instead more about being able to ask the right questions and have enough empathy and I guess understanding to see the strategic role that digital can play in transforming their business. So, like before I worked on Google at Essence, like my last client was Combank. And when you think about like traditional sectors like banking, they've done a very good job in being able to identify the strategic vision in digitizing their product offering. And from there, that's completely then led everything else. So I think that strategic like vision setting is the critical piece there, because if you identify the opportunity, getting the specialists into the business and transforming the product all kind of falls in place from there. And on the converse, looking at like journalism and the news industry, that's another example where, digitization hasn't perhaps like created the impact that they were hoping in terms of the bottom line, because, the print business versus the digital editorial business, kind of like Josh talks about it a lot, like the legacy aspect. It's like, what's driving majority of your bottom line revenue? Are you digitizing at the detriment of that? And I think being able to balance that as well is something that I think is really critical for C-suite execs to be able to understand. So asking the right questions and having the strategy, the business strategy, I think is more critical than having a deeper grasp of what platforms are required or what stack you need to have in place, because that's why they hire people like Josh, people that are really smart in being able to understand that. So I think that's kind of my 2 cents on this matter.
Yeah, I think as long as everyone can sort of hopefully agree that at the end of the day, digital should be in service to financial customer goals and staff goals. And as long as everyone can speak those languages on some level. So if you create that as your shared language, then, because also I think I touched on earlier, you can just like force digital platforms and digital solutions in where they don't really belong. And then the digital team is like, why are we even doing this? And then it doesn't create the financial customer facing outcomes you want, and then exec is like, well, that was a failure, and then the blame game starts happening. So I think getting everyone aligned and creating a shared language is probably the thing I bang on about the most almost in my whole job. So we'll ask a question, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience. So Josh, maybe this one is closer to your heart. So how is your organization using data? Or how has that shifted the use of data since kind of COVID has accelerated digital transformation? And maybe start with you, Josh. Yeah.
Ours is not a COVID acceleration. If anything, the thing that accelerated last year was just the speed at which we got some of our new platforms built. So for us, 10, let alone all of the brands that sit within our wider company, Viacom CBS, there's I think from memory, 16 platforms you can currently watch 10 play on in a digital context. So getting our data capability rolled out across everyone. From that, I mean the analytics, the ability to target audiences, because we're a commercial TV network, we make our revenues through advertising, and then all of the things that sit around that. So we're in digital media, and especially like the beauty of our space is you're taking what's traditionally been in the direct response world, or you're taking mechanisms for targeting that you've had in search, display, short form video, social media, and you're now able to apply a lot of those targeting methodologies into a big brand mechanism like TV. That's quite an interesting space to be in. And so we've had a content race that's always there, and now we've had a data arms race, and ours is like been able to accelerate massively. So less around the COVID stuff, more around just pure the way our viewer and industry is changing rapidly, and TV now represents, especially digital TV now, has an increasing geography on any given media plan. It is still a challenging thing. I'm sure Steph can attest to. It's a hard thing to demonstrate the value because you're still buying in fairly fragmented ways, but your ability to target me, who's 21 and exceptionally wealthy, on a TV screen with all those things to connect the dots with a particular advertiser is now a lot more available than it was. And so for us, we've got things like who's watching, when are they watching, how are they watching, etc., because we've been collecting all those data points from a pretty wide and fragmented ecosystem. We're doing a lot of work around connecting the dots and maintaining kind of an identity product. And then productizing that to monetize our audiences and our content. It has layers and layers and layers of supplementary data partnerships. So Lizzy, your business uses Flybys a lot. Flybys is a key partner for us too for targeting. So we're able to layer in these things, and the breadth of data that's now available, especially in our brand environment, is massive. So that's the monetization part. We're also growing our sophistication with our ability to personalize communications. We've adopted a lot of our marketing automation around push messaging, in-app messaging, a lot of email sophistication too, that draws on the viewing habits of our audience, and that's growing. There's some of our use cases that are fairly low in maturity if you compared us to a sophisticated business that has a strong personalization program, but we're growing into that space. We're just doing it with a huge volume of data. So ours is both. It's used primarily for commercial purposes around content decisioning and programming and how things are performing, but for the most part, data for us is a monetization tool, because that's how it's been built from the start.
Yep, fair enough. And I might skip over to the audience questions now, actually, because that's really taken off in there. So sorry, guys, if you maybe some data questions will come up and you can answer them in context. Okay, so always the fun time of the session. So let's hear from you guys. So I'm just going to start to kind of run through these, read from them on the fly. So excuse me if I get some names wrong, etc. And some of these will have been from a little while ago, so it's possible that we've already answered. But let's see. So from Albert, how do you deal with change management and change fatigue with your staff to bring them on the journey for a successful transition from the old ways to the new? Do we think we've sort of touched on that? But I think the change management question is quite an interesting one. Just kind of open to the three of you. Do any of you guys have like a robust change management function inside your businesses? Or potentially none of you?
Lizzy, why don't you tackle that?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I would say I'm going to approach this very much from the product perspective and the change I'm seeing within my org. I think one of the things that I'm really invested in is making sure that our team feels supported with the right training to go on the journey. And then whether that be agile or product management best practices, which I know, Eric, you're very focused on as well, but that's sort of something that I'm really invested in. Standing up the product chapter within our organization so I can provide that ongoing support and leadership to help people in the journey as it relates to change within their roles and evolving in those roles. And then I think the other thing that I am just really focused on more from a leadership management perspective is, feedback and recognition and making sure that I'm really hitting the mark in terms of, people are on a pretty uphill journey and really trying to find as a leader the right ways to give appropriate feedback and recognition so that people are seeing the successes and I suppose we can maintain morale.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I think you've touched on a whole bunch of really good points there. I mean, like gap analysis of people's skill sets and fill that in with training, but being aware also that change fatigue, which Albert has mentioned, is a thing. There's only so much new information someone can ingest before their brain just kind of melts and shuts down. So how do you sort of incrementally build up people's skills and bring them on that journey without overwhelming them? It is a difficult question. I think we're all kind of in that mode now of trying to figure out how to solve that. Great question. Thanks, Albert. Next one, and this is one that's quite close to my heart. So where do you see your prospective organizations heading in terms of customer experience and digital trends? So I'll maybe sort of skew this to how are you using digital trends to improve the customer experience? Maybe Steph, maybe on behalf of your clients potentially.
Yeah, so I think something that is quite interesting for us is we always talk about ad experience. So, something that I think we tend to focus on is like ad frequency and things like that. Like our clients are really passionate about ensuring that ads show up in the right way, that we're not, creating messages that are, taking away from whatever the person is doing rather than adding to it. So there's a lot of ways in which we think about ad formats a bit differently to ensure that, the message that we place in front of consumers is one that is, helpful rather than creating ad annoyance, because we know that those types of triggers impact, I guess, sentiment and all different types of hearts and minds that we're trying to win over for our brands. So that is definitely something where we focus on what are the emerging, products that exist within the ad marketplace? How do people organically consume these platforms, or how do people read websites? And we use that, I guess, organic consumer behavior to inform how we show up.
And thank you. And Lizzy, maybe being a B2C organization, you might have some interesting insights on the customer experience work that's happening. Oh, just the old mute. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's always got to be at least once in a session.
I think there has been the accelerant through COVID for people to adopt online shopping, try it. And I think the reality is we were always focused on the omni-channel shopping experience. So, it might be the top-up shop that you do in store and the regular big shop online. But I think for us, it's just we really now as a business are just laser focused on providing a best-in-class omni-channel shopping experience. It's not channel specific. We've had a huge accelerant in terms of converting people onto online, which is great and where we want to be, but it's just making sure that our teams strategically are focused on the omni-channel, not channel specific customer experience evolution.
Yeah, very interesting. And all right, thank you, Marl. I hope Mari, I can't tell if that's an I or an L, sorry. A super interesting one next from Tim Stanford. And I might just scene set with this. So what are your thoughts in regards to offshore talent, whether it's filling skill shortages or, sort of versus cost of local talent? So, obviously, a major reason why software developers and other digital talent are in very short supply right now is because we can't bring in external offshore talent. I mean, that's always been a major, particularly for digital talent, always been a major influx coming in, and now that doesn't exist anymore. And it's put a real strain on the on organizations. So this is now where people are starting to look to alternatives of how can we get digital talent in different ways than we used to do. So I see Steph nodding. Did you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Mainly because it's really relevant to the business model at Essence, and to also, the broader group that Essence is part of, being Group M. So yeah, offshoring is a a pretty critical part of ensuring that when there's local talent gaps, that we're kind of keeping things going for our clients. So we have like a team in India that that are focused on trading and delivering a lot of functional outputs for our clients. So that is definitely something that I think, as part of the media industry, like something that is increasingly impacting business models and how the media industry stays profitable in that aspect. And I think beyond that too, not just in terms of functional output, but strategic minds. Like, we've been able to be really fortunate in tapping into some really deep data scientists and deep experts in their field by having a cross-market team. So the fact that we have data scientists dedicated to their craft, sitting in Singapore, or creative strategists sitting in Singapore, means that we don't have to just recruit locally on the ground, but we can kind of create client solutions cross market. And I think that is the luxury that we have at Essence in being regionally and globally connected. But at the same time, it's something that I think for the companies that have that footprint, definitely something that they should look to harness, because the pandemic has taught us greater than ever, there's definitely huge demand for skills, like what you kind of mentioned, Eric, but not enough supply. So that being able to tap into a global network of people is a really powerful thing that thankfully we've been able to take advantage of in this time.
Yeah, no, really good call out, because my head was in the bringing in talent to like work inside your organization, as opposed to what you're talking about.
Yeah, we've been doing the opposite, offshoring.
Yeah, which is working with offshore organizations, which is I've done a fair bit of in the past, but it does come with its dangers. Like, I've been working with an offshore dev team that just went dark on me halfway through a project before, and what do? You have no recourse. So you have to do really good vetting, etc. So you can find really good people really cheap, but there are dangers that come with it. So how do you juggle all of this new world where there's so many new constraints and new situations? We've got about 2 minutes left, so we might just end the questions there. What we'll do is we'll send out an email tomorrow to the participants, and we'll try to we'll see if we can answer a few of these questions in that email. There'll also be some information around ways you can engage with XI, and if you want to do some training with us, either foundational or more of full upskilling programs. So I guess overall, just thank you to Steph, to Josh, and to Lizzy for coming on today and sharing your insights. And super interesting. I know you guys, like, we were super excited. Some heavy hitters on the panel. So thank you for contributing your time. To everyone that showed up today, thank you for so much. We hope you took something out of it. If you want to add any of us on LinkedIn, feel free. If you just want to email with a question, again, feel free. And did you guys just want any last parting thoughts before we end the session from the three of you?
I would only I'll probably add on to what Steph was saying now, just in answer to that question, is I think we need to think quite hard about our investment choices, because like even for our business, we'll end up buying tools and investing in things that require us to be fixed. So I think there's something around the way we're strategically designing our businesses in future that shouldn't be so reliant and dependent on having bums on seats locally. I think there's definitely some merit in that. So I'd love to have a virtual team or a team that can work anywhere and independently. I don't think that's the most practical for every business. Like, Lizzy, a big part of your business is making sure groceries don't land up on shelves. That's pretty important that you have a local team. But I think within reason, where you are going through some of these more digital aspects, I like the flexibility of having people in different areas that you control. And so I think we need more of that, more flexibility with working with teams across the world. I think we'd all be better for it.
I think that's a great way to end on is, that, COVID, the acceleration of digital transformation, there have been challenges and we tend to focus on the downsides, but there are massive upsides as well. And, the rate of positive change is exponential, right in line with the challenges. So again, thank you so much, everyone. I think we're just at about time now. Hopefully you took quite a bit out of today. I certainly did. And we'll see you again soon. We run these every month on various topics. Next month, we're going to be specifically talking around the shortage of digital talent. So that's a little bit of a segue into next month. So thanks, guys. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.